This is episode 6, I think. I am one of your hosts, Chido Natasha, and I'm with my wonderful, amazing best friend of a co-host.
Natasha Mawera. Oh, it's been a while since we've done this, so it's like so weird after exams, starting back again, doing these interviews. But yeah, excited.
Yeah, and we are joined by the amazing, the beautiful. Wow, my English doesn't want to. You know what? I'm speechless. You leave me speechless. That's exactly what it is. But yes, the amazing Liza Leibowitz, and yeah, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
So firstly, thank you so much for having me today. I'm actually very excited. This is my second one of these interviews, so I feel like I'm prepped now and I'm ready to give my best today. So a little bit about myself. I am currently the welfare officer within Swansea University Students' Union. I'm a Swansea alumni now. I graduated in 2020 and I studied law. I initially ran to be welfare officer mostly because of my experience being an international mixed Black student, or should I say lack there of an experience. I think I'm not sure if this is the same for the both of you, but I spent most of like my first couple of years here not fully aware, for lack of a better word, how bad things kind of were for students like me within the higher education sector. Mm-hmm. So I think being an international student, you're almost set to assume because you've moved somewhere foreign, you kind of just adapt to the cultures, be it negative. But like in my third year, I was elected as Black and minority ethnic officer. I think that's now changed to Black, Asian and minority ethnic officer in the remit names. And that gave me actual insight that, you know, these experiences weren't that great and this wasn't the case. I shouldn't have felt that this was just okay. And that the university maybe just weren't as considerate at the time of people like me, and there was work that could be done to fix that. And lucky enough, that was also the year our previous education officer was elected, and she got to do so many things in her term that was implementing really effective change. So I'm so sorry I went into a whole spiel, but that's why I initially ran. And I reran because while initially I set up to make changes around experiences that I personally faced being from a BAME background, and what I'm assuming many people from the same background do face, I was able to educate myself on the experiences of other minority demographics or underrepresented groups who also needed potentially someone to have that voice for them and give them that additional support and representation. So that is why I ran.
Oh, wow. That is amazing. Already, I'm impressed. But also like just seeing the work that you've done, you've actually been putting in the work. The one thing that I am wondering though is your last term pretty much was, I think, not too long after COVID then started, like everything just kind of shifted. Do you think that you managed to achieve what you had planned to, or did the COVID situation make it a bit difficult, especially with student engagement and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think just considering everything that you've touched on. So when I had initially ran, it was kind of literally right before the university had closed off because we had our first COVID case. So our manifestos, I think as a whole team, were very focused on a normal academic year, and all our manifesto points were things that we could do physically, not much like online stuff that we had to do now. But I think I was very lucky in that when we did come in, it was full-blown COVID regulations and everything. But when we had to look at our manifestos, my points were kind of really easily adaptable to an online, or we could just change wording a little bit to have some type of an online adaptability type of thing with the terms that I did put in. So I actually did manage to achieve all of my manifesto points except one for the last academic year. And going into this academic year, we've kind of, I think the whole team had like a half, you know, we know that we need things that we can change, whether it's be in person or online still. So that was fine. Engagement wise, it was so difficult. I mean, it's very dependent, it's very up and down. But certain things students would really want to be engaged with, they'd want to kind of join online and we'd have huge engagement. And then certain things you have like one person in the room and you're like, maybe I didn't market this well enough. But yeah, it's given us a lot of skills, I think, on how to build engagement with certain things and certain projects that we get involved with. So yeah, that has been, I think, the biggest issue with the whole pandemic. But well, there's been a lot of issues with the pandemic, but engagement was a huge issue.
Yeah, no, well done for navigating that, because I think for me, working with a society, same thing. You just really don't know what's going to get a lot of engagement. Sometimes people show up, other times people don't, depends on the season. So that, I guess, you being flexible enough and managing to like complete most of your things on your manifesto, listen, well done.
Oh, thank you.
That's great. I actually just pulled this out because I don't know if you can see it, but I still have
that.
Yeah, before we get into our topic for today, I'm just curious to find out, being welfare officer during a pandemic, like what was that like for you? Because obviously everyone's going through their own mental health issues and trying to figure out how to navigate that space. But for you, as I suppose the pioneer, the face of all things welfare for the students and the Students' Union, how was that for you?
I think it was really difficult. I think it was a lot more workload than I maybe in a normal year would have had to have, and it was a lot of reactive work. And I think I'm just naturally a person who gets very personally attached to certain stories or certain experiences. So I think that was more difficult. I wasn't someone who, before coming into the role, and that might be just because of where I'm from and the way I grew up, but I wasn't someone who tackled a lot of like mental health concerns in myself as much. So coming in and having to kind of experience certain mental health concerns myself, I think within like the second lockdown was the one for me that triggered everything. It was quite difficult, but I think there is kind of a silver lining in that all the work that I do get to do, be it reactive or not, benefits students in such a positive way and benefits their mental health in some way. And that kind of keeps me going in that sense. But it was definitely a lot more, and a lot more meetings, a lot more committees than in a usual year I would end up on. But I think it has been really good. I think experience-wise, I'm coming out a lot more resilient. I've had a lot of opportunities from it. So there is a lot of positives to it.
Yeah, so I think just getting onto that mental health piece. So today, what we're pretty much trying to do is unpacking student mental well-being, because I think that's a really big thing, COVID or not. And I think before we go into it, I think it would be doing such a great disservice to just jump in without clarifying some terms, because I think it can get very confusing with the terms, knowing which terms are appropriate, which terms aren't. Could you clarify some terms? What are the difference between, say there's mental health problems, then there's mental distress, and then there's, psychiatric disorders? Could you just tap into that a little bit?
Yeah, so I'll start off by just, for the overall discussion, just noting that I'm not a mental health practitioner. That's not what I'm qualified in. But I have been trained quite extensively with like mental health first aid, resilience, and a bunch of different things. So I feel confident enough to give this information, but just keep a note that I'm not a mental health practitioner, unfortunately, yet, maybe. But yeah, just with all the terms that you've brought up, there are a lot of similarities that we need to keep in check. So this is a whole umbrella of things, and where there's similarities kind of lie in that is that all of those terms are considering somebody's mental state. They're considering that mental state might have an effect on someone's behavior, their mood, or their emotions. Did I get that correct? Yes, I think I did. So I'll try and break it down just play by play. So mental health problems is somewhat of an umbrella term for a wide range of mental health conditions. So these conditions can have effects around the way you behave, the way you feel, the way you think, and the way you process things. And then going on to mental distress, similarly, it does consider a wide range of mental health problems, but can be defined as kind of a negatively heightened or active state of your mental health. So essentially, when your behavioral, mental, or emotional states are triggered or active, consider it of the mental health problem that you might be facing. So just to make a bit more sense, you could be someone who experiences anxiety disorders, and this could lead to a panic attack. So the panic attack is the state of distress, your mental state of distress. And then going into psychiatric disorders. So this is a type of a mental health problem. that has a great deal of effect on your thinking and sometimes the way you process things. So this will have a direct effect on your mood and your behavior thereafter. So an example of this is, I think, eating disorders, they fall under this category, as well as schizophrenia as well, that also fits under this category. So that's kind of a broad definition for each of them, but they do have those similarities throughout.
That's interesting. I'd never heard of, I think you mentioned the word like triggered and active there.
Yeah.
I'd never heard of it put that way. So I think that's quite interesting, actually. It's an interesting way to view it.
Definitely. And I think usually when we talk about mental health, at least within the university, we talk a lot about anxiety, stress, depression, but obviously this doesn't cover the breadth. Are there any lesser known mental health problems that, you know, you could, I guess, let us know about? Some things that, you know, we usually don't consider and probably need to be more aware of when we have some of these conversations, because sometimes I guess it can be quite focused on the very few, but you know, everyone has a different story and they're working through different things.
Yeah, definitely. That's such a good question. So like you said, the usual culprits are depression, anxiety disorder, panic attacks, bipolar disorder. But I wouldn't say lesser, or maybe I would kind of touch on unawareness or misconceptions around certain mental health problems. So unawareness wise, you know, some people may not know that things like obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, is actually a mental health problem. And so hoarding actually falls under this as well. And misconceptions wise, I think we hear a lot about specifically like anxiety and people experiencing it, but people tend to not disassociate the experience of having anxiety to an anxiety disorder. So anxiety being something that's super normal for all of us to experience. And sometimes it can actually be a really good thing for us to experience due to like its motivating trigger. And I think as students, a lot of people experience anxiety, and it does give you that extra push. It can give you that extra push. Obviously, when it gets to a certain state, it then turns into anxiety disorder, which is something in which if you are experiencing it, you'd likely not be able to function in a, for lack of a better term, because there isn't a normal, but in a normal, societal normal manner at all. And you can be in a stagnant state of distress during that period. And also maybe to touch on that, many things actually fall under anxiety disorders. So for example, I mentioned OCD earlier. This falls under anxiety disorders. So maybe that kind of gives you more understanding. It's a lot of a broader conversation than just the terms around these mental health conditions.
I really like that you touched on that. I think sometimes we get so used to just saying, oh, I'm just so like, I have anxiety about this. And we kind of just throw these words around. And I think sometimes that can detract from how debilitating these things can actually be, especially for people that are living with different mental health problems. Are there any terms that you would suggest that people don't use that could be maybe disrespectful or just demeaning in any kind of way? Because I think, you know, sometimes I think I was reading and people are like, instead of saying someone is struggling with a mental problem, you should probably maybe say that they're living with it. Just because I suppose the struggling with everything makes it seem as though, you know, someone is sick, basically, and they should be pitied. So yeah, could you just, I guess, you know, give us some advice on how we can approach this, especially in the university, so that, you know, from that perspective, we're respectful?
Yeah, definitely. I think when considering terminology, I think it's good to consider where the mental health discussion has kind of traveled over the years. I'm so glad you asked this question, because it's understandably so easy for people to unknowingly get it wrong. It's fairly recent that we see mental health issues are being more acknowledged and people are educating themselves more, but there's always been this negative stigma and negative affiliation around mental health concerns that can be due to a number of different reasons. But you'll hear people sometimes affiliating someone who may be living with a mental illness as crazy or a nutcase, or the one we usually see on social media as psycho. And I'd stray away from referring to people in that manner, even if it is banter or some like lighthearted conversations. The likeliness is that most people have had some type of a battle with their mental health at one point or another. And all the terms I've mentioned have extremely negative affiliations. And I think we need to create a culture in which people think it's okay and build acceptance and a willingness to help so that people feel comfortable accessing support instead of delegitimizing their experiences and spreading false information on what that experience could feel or look like. So that's not to take away that mental health concerns have a negative impact on people, but it's a way of deflating the impact that it could have on people who actually might have a mental illness and haven't sought support or aren't the most vocal about it at that point. I'd also stray away from saying things like, I've got OCD, you know, because you like your bed made a certain way, or your corners are super sharp, or you like your home being super tidy, or even saying things like, this is something I only heard when I moved here, but you've had a manic day at work, just because maybe you've sent two more emails than you usually would have, like in a normal day. But saying things like that, I mean, believe me, that's not the experience of having a manic episode, to describe it in the least. And just being considerate that such a light-hearted statement feeds into such a negative pool of delegitimization and false narratives. I think moving on to terminology to use, which is something that you've already touched on, Natasha, I would advise that when discussing mental health concerns, trying to disaffiliate the concern and the person, because they are two separate things. So for example, instead of saying they're schizophrenic, say this is someone who is experiencing or has a past with schizophrenic episodes. Another example is people like to say they're bipolar. So change it in the same way. Mention that this is someone who's experiencing or has a past of bipolar disorder, if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense, because it's kind of like a person is so much more than you know, the things that they experience, isn't it? So, you know, just because, I don't know, I can't ride a bike, right? I genuinely can't. You're not going to you're not going to refer to me as, you know, the non-bike rider per se. I'm still Natasha, and I think that does, I think it humanizes people. For sure. Is what I'm getting, instead of saying, oh, they've got this problem. So it definitely makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think even that disaffiliation, I've heard of it in terms of coping, like with, you know, for example, if we are experiencing any of these mental health problems, to literally go through that mental process of saying, okay, I am still, as Natasha was saying, the person that I am. I just happen to be experiencing these either symptoms of mental health problems, or I'm currently displaying, you know, these symptoms. Like, what does that mean for me? And then steps to take afterwards. So I think that really is important, not just with dealing with other people, but with ourselves as well.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, no, it helps to be kind and to be aware of these steps and this information. But as university students, you know, there's a lot of things and a lot of stresses that could lead us to either have mental health problems, or for us to discover that we may actually have a mental health illness. What are some of the things that you found within, like, the university lifestyle or within the systems that you have, like, seen may actually cause students to experience these mental health problems?
That's a really good question. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, for example, there's things that every student will experience, which is going to be stress and anxiety, for example, that could lead to mental health problems. And that's just due to your exams, your assignments, the workload, the pressure, the heightened experience of being at a university and that higher education sector. And I mean, it's already been proven that 1 in 4 students would have been found to experience some type of mental health problem while at university as a result of university. But then you can go a lot deeper into it and break it down into specific demographics and traumas, both past and present, that as a whole, you know, that will just open a whole can of worms of issues that could lead to a lot of mental health concerns while in uni. So for example, maybe I can touch on lived experience being an international student and working with a lot of international students. There's the impact of things like moving away from home, communication barriers, limited communication with family members when you do move here, and that could be because of time differences and whatever that might happen after that. And, you know, adapting to a new environment and a new culture, that could easily have a very direct and significant impact to anybody's mental health. And we have a huge influx of students every single year that come in experiencing exactly that. But then you could go to a completely different demographic, like disabled students, for example, and they might not have access to a lot of their accessibility needs, such as appropriate infrastructure, adaptability to the new normal, hate crimes, which a lot of different demographics do end up facing. And unfortunately, that is something that happens within the university, as much as we wouldn't want it to be. We could take it all the way around as well and speak about caring students, people with caring responsibilities. They have that extra burden while as well tackling university. Students with financial difficulties, I mean, a whole pandemic. I mean, there's a lot of things that could affect student mental health, and the list could definitely go on and on and on. But it is down to the personal experience, I think, of every student coming in and what they do come in with. And that has a very direct effect on student mental health.
And I think with these different demographics, what are some of the structures that are in place to support all these like mental health problems that could face our students? Because you mentioned a lack of infrastructure for disabled students or just international students and so on. Like, what structures are in place to support our students?
I think surrounding mental health, there is I think this is something that's definitely growing so much, especially within Swansea University, in that I'm seeing a lot of different departments taking in safeguarding initiatives, taking in mental health practices within the way they function as a department. And this is seen from all the way to our senior leadership team in the university, all the way down to security. I might just maybe for the sake of this session, touch on what I feel is most helpful for students, just on a general consensus, and then maybe I'll touch on where certain demographics might get the most support. So I can start with maybe our Wellbeing department within the university. So they're kind of the pit stop place in the university for mental health concerns and disability. So a lot of our disabled students would get a lot of support through them, and they help them with any of their needs that they might have. We also have a disability officer within the Students' Union that would help support that demographic of students. So that's a huge amount of support already. And within the mental health aspect, we're one of the few universities that actually offer mental health services such as therapies, counseling. We have mental health practitioners, things like that. So that's directly accessible for all students within the university. Then we can go on to our welfare department in Campus Life. So Campus Life, they kind of have like a very wide different bunch of departments within them. So International Campus Life would directly be supporting international students in visa concerns, things that might be directly affecting them. But our welfare department within Campus Life have more around the student experience. So putting on campaigns that ensure that students are being represented or feeling that, well, they have a lot of different campaigns to better your kind of welfare. So things around educating people around the GP and the benefits of actually accessing the GP, that's an example. Then we have our Advice and Support Center. So this is something that sits within the Students' Union. So this is kind of like the best support for me in my head, the best place to start when you need support as a student, because they can help you around a wide different range of things around like academic integrity, housing issues, legal issues, mental health concerns. So they're just kind of that one place that you can go where, you know, as a student, because they're a department in the Students' Union, they're 100% working for you. And, you know, they're here to support you in any way that you do need them. And then we can go on to ISS, so our Inclusive Support Services. And under ISS is our new service called Connect. So Connect is like a peer-to-peer support program in which it's kind of moving towards, they're kind of moving towards a social prescription type of profile. And what that kind of is moving away from the normal forms of accessing support or getting mental health support and taking it into the community. So there's been a lot of research done around how these different practices that stray you away from like medication and the normal GP route can benefit you. So that's something that's being introduced and implemented in the university. In accommodation, we've got, and in Connect as well, there's an international buddy scheme. It's not the most advertised, it's not well advertised enough, but there is an international buddy scheme in which international students can get together and kind of share those lived experiences. Within accommodation, we've got our resident life assistants. So I think they're usually the first point of contact during working hours for students who may be in distress in accommodation. You would be shocked how much stuff actually goes down in accommodation, or you might not be shocked at all. But they have such a huge role, and then they work really closely with security and that after hours support. And then obviously each of the colleges going into faculties, they're working towards getting welfare provisions across the board, because currently only some colleges have it, which is a shame. Then your academic mentors, then you have me. Yes. So you could always come to me. So I'm here to support students and kind of be that welfare voice for students, and kind of make sure the university is tackling certain issues that directly affect student welfare. So yeah, we could sit here all day and talk about all the different parts, but I think those are the main ones that kind of work for students. And then we've got our liberation part-time officers in the union as well that directly cater to specific demographics.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That was such a comprehensive
list.
It's brilliant.
To give that feature why a lot of times.
No, it's brilliant, because I think it's very easy to be in university and not know what's available to you.
Yeah.
And I think so many times, I mean, even for me, and, you know, maybe Chido, it's the same. Sometimes you figure out a way to deal with your own issues, you know, either you go to your friends or you do whatever, but when they're actual support structures, it's good to know about it. Yeah. And I think as students trying to navigate uni, it's good to know that the support is there. The biggest step is accessing it, you know, so that's the next thing that needs to be there, but at least knowing that the support is in place, that helps a lot. I just wanted to ask a few questions. So I was like trying to write them down as you were as you were going through them. So the advice and support services that you mentioned, how can people contact them?
And so during COVID, it's kind of changed a lot. Before, you could easily just pop onto campus, go into their office whenever you did need support. But now they're mostly offering their email service or their drop-in services. So you can find the drop-in service on the Student Union website. They're literally just on a Zoom. You can pop in and they'll be there to answer your questions real time. So that happens every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And that's from like a different welfare advisors each day. And then the email is advice@swansea-union.co.uk. So those are the two ways now that you can access the Advice and Support Centre.
Awesome. And the second one, ISS. So you mentioned Connect. How do people access that?
So Connect is relatively new. So you can find them on the Wellbeing webpage on the university website. But it's kind of like a sub-bracket underneath that, and then it takes you to their own website. But we're going to be doing a lot of work to kind of see how to make that process a lot easier for students to access. So having something on our union website, making the social media a bit more accessible to students, things like that. So a lot of work is being done, but currently they're just kind of in that bracket under the Wellbeing page.
Okay, brilliant. And I think your email is like available on the Students' Union website and everything. So we'll put it somewhere around on the screen.
Over my face.
Yeah. You mentioned there like having to, work on the website to maybe make it more accessible to students. Are there any other limitations that you've seen in your tenure as welfare officer that probably prevents students from gaining access to these services?
Yeah, and I say it's such a shame because, like I said before, even just with speaking with multiple universities across the UK, we have some of, I think, the best university services that we could offer in regards to mental health, like counselling services and wellbeing support, like I've mentioned. But I think one thing that, I don't want to shoot myself in the foot, but one thing that I think could be done a lot better is kind of seeing how we can diversify the services that we do have, because while we're doing a lot of decolonization work in academics, there needs to be a lot of decolonization work within our professional services as well. Seeing how we can better reach out to the students that wouldn't necessarily reach out to us first, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Because there is a wide range of students that are more susceptible to mental health concerns, such as people from a BAME background, but they're also the least likely to reach out. So what are we doing with our marketing? How are we marketing it to these demographics of students? Do they feel like they can trust the people who are providing these services? Do they see themselves within these services? So things like that. I think that's something that is a long time in the process going to be kind of running, but it is something that we do need to work on. I'd say a main limitation that's being looked at now is the consistency across all the colleges. Because if you're in law currently, or if you're in engineering currently, you're having a completely different welfare experience. And that's just because each department kind of has a say on what they can provide, or have different budgets that allow them to provide certain services or certain members of staff. I think with the new restructures into the faculties, this is something that will kind of be across the board, and we'll be able to provide that support, because students do usually, when you do come to university, the people that you'd most likely know are your academic mentors. So that's who you're actually reaching out to, but are they trained enough to deal with the issues that are being brought to them? Is there someone who's actually trained that they can be signposted to within the colleges that can, you know, deal with those issues? So I think that's kind of where I'd see the main limitations on the services.
Yeah. Okay. I think I completely understand you there when you talk about the training of the academic mentors. It's something that Natasha and I talk about frequently, actually, and I happen to have struck gold with mine when I spoke to her about my own mental health problems and anxiety, and who she, I suppose, sent me to within the university to give me support. Without that, honestly, I would have been drowning. I mean, I still failed, but like I would have been drowning more regardless, you know. So
yeah,
I
I'm
think
so sorry that was your experience.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. We're over it now. We've pulled through.
Now on the other side of
yes. But no, I think it's really important because, like you said, that is probably the one person out of all the university that students will know most. If it's not their lecturers, it's their academic mentors or their friends, you know? So yeah, I think that's a really good initiative.
Yeah. I think I definitely liked you touching on, I think, getting that uniformity across all the departments in terms of the services that they give, and trying to proactively reach out to the groups that, you know, may not necessarily reach out for support. Because as you mentioned earlier, that some of these services are quite reactionary. So it's usually when someone has experienced something, they then approach someone. But I suppose with the age-old saying, prevention is better than cure, how could the university more proactively tackle some of the issues that students face mental health wise, so that it doesn't get to the point that I'm coming to you when I'm rock bottom, but before I even get there, we stop it and I can start making my way back to a healthier state of mind?
Yeah, definitely. I think something that the university can do is work really close with students to target out their individual needs and kind of work around them from that. And there's obviously times that we know, well, everyone would be aware of that. Students would experience a higher amount of mental health concerns, so specifically around like exam periods, assignment periods. I think we need to make sure that we're adequately intervening before those points to make sure the students are okay or on a good track. I think it needs to be implemented into teaching, and that lecturers should be able to tell students, if you're feeling like this, please understand it's so normal. Calm down, speak to this person if you need this extra support. And I think a huge thing that would be such a good addition or continued access of support is around self-certification. So specifically around mental health concerns, I think this is something that needs to remain, because this is a practice that enables students to take that kind of step back, have that extra period of time in a very stressful period, understandably, and be able to kind of deal with themselves. And we need to take away that whole evidence factor around that mental, because it is a deterrent. We need to ensure that we're not deterring people from dealing with their mental health concerns, or, you know, you get what I mean?
Yeah.
So ensuring that we continue to have that, even though something we're fighting for currently, but hopefully it will stay. And I think a huge part in this as well is adequately, very early on in the student life cycle, promoting the services to students, because they are there and they're for all of us to utilize. But if you're not aware of them, you're going to try and deal with everything by yourself, which you don't have to. Some people can manage to do that, and some people can rely on their friends. But if you're kind of sinking, please just know that there is kind of a ship that you can jump onto that's going to support you.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to phrase it. If you're sinking, just know there's a ship that you can jump onto.
Made it up on the spot.
Come on.
We hear the lawyer in you. It's okay.
We can hear it. We love it. No, thank you so much, honestly, for that. I think I've learned a lot. It's a shame that now I'm leaving the university and like learning about some of these things, but you know, I have been exposed to some of these services, and at least with the exposure that I have had, I am grateful that that support structure was there. And, you know, I hope that as you continue to fight for students, that there's more support, because I do think, and I think Chido and I can both attest to this, that there is more work to be done to support students through university, because it's such a tumultuous time, besides the fact that you've just uprooted yourself sometimes and moving into a whole different environment, and uni is totally different to the high school experience, and there's so much growing pains that happen simply just because of the stage in life that we're in, and you know, I think it's just our hope and prayer that the university continues to do that good work. And I guess just to wrap this up, you're about to start a new term as the Wellbeing Officer again. And I'm sure everyone who's watching, you can tell she's so amazing, so eloquent. She's out here to fight for you. Could you just tell us a little bit about some of your priorities going into this next year in relation to mental health very quickly, and maybe just some closing words and advice to students that are watching regarding to what they can expect from you, what support they can get, you know, anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, definitely. I think as student union officers, I think a lot of our work that we do anyways has a very direct effect on student mental health. Well, I'd hope so. But specifically around mental health, in the new term, I aim to train all student leads around mental health, and in Reach, expand this to student-facing staff. So this is touching on something that we spoke about earlier on academic mentors, but around student leads, it's such an important thing for them to be aware and equipped, because they do kind of cater to a large demographic of the university. And this is just to give examples of student leads, they're student reps. There's sporting execs, society execs. We've got, there's a different group I'm forgetting, but I'm so sorry if I've forgotten you, but you're in there. Our part-time officers, our part-time officers as well. So ensuring that they're all trained up to adequately deal with students, because we do get a bunch of students in distress reaching out to variations of us, and we should be equipped. Same goes to student-facing staff. I aim to continue representing different demographics through campaigns, so things like Disability History Month, Black History Month, campaigns against period poverty, food accessibility, etc., and continue to run mental health workshops. I also aim to create more mental health resources. So Chido actually showed you one of them. So I did write a guide to common university mental health problems, and there's an international mental health guide I wrote as well. So I aim to expand on these and make sure that we have adequate resources for different demographics. The main project that's currently running now is the reintroduction of Nightline. So there is a big gap from when university services close at like 5 p.m. every day till the next morning. There's a big gap that we're kind of missing out on there for student support. There's obviously the security services and whatnot, but they can only expand so far. So I aim to reintroduce Nightline, which will be a kind of call service for support for students who need that extra support post closing hours. So that's something that's currently ongoing. So hopefully comes on soon. But yeah, I think there's the main things that I'm focusing on the next academic year, mental health wise.
Oh, that sounds great. Sounds like you have your work cut out for you, but
Yeah.
good work for the students and for yourself, I hope. So honestly, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I was trying really hard not to self-diagnose myself throughout this entire thing, but we genuinely appreciate you coming here and speaking not just to us but to the students who are watching, to the members of staff who are watching. I think it's so important to continue to discuss mental health and the progress that's being made within the university, obviously globally as well, but to us this is quite a specific niche conversation.
Yeah.
So no, we are very grateful for you coming on today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm quite excited I was invited. Thank you. Feeling honored. But yeah, if any students do need to reach out for any support, like my email somewhere in this recording somewhere beforehand, please feel free to reach out for absolutely anything. We're always here to support you as the Students' Union full-time officers. Thank you to these two amazing ladies that took their time out to continue having these sessions and discuss these important topics. Finally, I can make you a LinkedIn, so I'm looking forward to the share when it does get posted.
Yeah, awesome. I think that is a wrap, ladies. So that is episode 6. Stay tuned for our future episodes. We will be covering, I think, mental health, particularly focused on international students. And we have an episode that will be coming out with the head of the School of Management. Well, the
School
Dean
Management,
of
Humanities, and Social Sciences.
Exactly. So stay tuned, stay safe, and remember to smile. Okay.
And subscribe wherever the box is. Notification
like
bells.
And share.
All that YouTube jazz.
Awesome. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.